Hey guys, Jeff Wiggum here, K1 Community. Just wanted to speak quickly regarding the shooting in Texas, um, and really what the impact of Christianity is. And I think that's a big issue for us to consider. We look at here in the news and we see this world, and no matter what degree of whether it's just the mainstream news that you listen to or whether it's uh, more stuff that's labeled conspiracy theorists or alternative media. But either way, we see this stuff happens in this world, terrible stuff. And I mean, to me, it certainly seems like there's a lot more of it. I think that's whether the shaking, the earth, natural, quote unquote, changes, or some of the violence and stuff that we see, or just the unrest. So, just obviously, like everyone else, your heart just goes out. You can't really imagine the Texas situation, sitting in church and having it happen. I looked at some of the a little bit of the footage from the church in an earlier recorded sermon, and I think there's so many in the world that would mock the simplicity or the commonness of the worship service, but I think that's a mistake. I think that's the beauty, that's the strength. It looks like it's the weakness of Christianity, but it's the strength. And that Christ he's love, and he allows us to be simple, just because you see a person and they behave in a way that's a little less complex or more simple or more common, humble, and whatever you want to call a small country church. They're no less intelligent and valuable to God, and their lives no less meaning, probably quite the contrary. So it was a heartbreaker. You can't even imagine that. You really can't. And so, but a lot of the commentary will go over to the gun rights. And, I certainly am a gun owner. I teach my kids about guns, and we hunt, and I'm definitely an advocate of weapons. I believe in even defending your home if your family's at risk, or you need to defend someone else's life. Absolutely, but nonetheless, it's not as a believer. So what does this mean to us as a believer? I think one, we can look at the gun side of it. We can look at the issue of we're not to quickly take life. We should be different than the rest of the world. We don't operate out of fear. Shouldn't operate out of hate, out of anger, out of anything. We should be long suffering. I don't think that means letting a church get shot up. I'm not exactly sure what it means to carry guns to church. And I know it's a controversial issue, but I'm not sure what it means. What the idea of carrying guns around is. Again, I'm in Georgia. I'm very comfortable around guns. I see them, but is for believers, is our response to sort of man up, and our first call to be our Second Amendment, or to be a loyalist or a American, or some guy from Georgia, is real tempting. But what we're Christians, and we're bought and paid for. Our life, someone had to give up their life to save our life. We need to be willing to give our life up as well for the Lord. And I think that's a very weighty issue of, this idea of violence, or the idea of carrying guns, and should be given more than just a cursory consideration. I think you have to, I understand why wearing a gun's no problem. I think back in my own life when I was younger, in my 20s, married for a year or so, someone broke into my car, and I was so glad that I didn't hear them break into my car outside of our house, and go outside with my 357 and try to defend my car. There were probably a bunch of kids. I'd hate to have lived all these years with having shot somebody. And if that sounds wimpy, or that sounds something else, I would say that there's a basis for you to sort of look into your faith of what does it mean to walk with Christ. He's calling you to be different. He's not calling you to be like the guy next door. He's not calling you to use your power and enforce and everything else. You know what? It's okay to lose sometimes. I mean, I don't try to lose. I would defend my car against somebody else or whatever else, but it's there's measurement in that. And so again, I think it's a good example for us to look and say, okay, what's our appropriate response? Whether it's living in a spirit of fear and carrying guns around all the time, potentially introducing guns into situations that could escalate it. A shooting is a very rare thing, like this church shooting is a very rare thing. I think we'd want to consider as Christians. So that's one consideration with that church shooting. The other consideration again is, I would say, let's looking at that church. On one hand, there's no point in raising it up as some kind of hyper nobility of the simplicity of the victims that are there. But there's something to be considered of the simple nature of it. There's all kinds of stuff about Antifa and other stuff that this guy might be caught up in, or atheism or the rest of it. There's a lot of stuff about his domestic. I have no clue. I've heard just what I've heard on the internet. But it sort of impacted me. I thought about my son at the gun range the other day. He posted a video of himself shooting an automatic weapon at a gun range, right? On his birthday, he wanted to rent an automatic weapon. And so, perfectly safe situation, shooting a Uzi 9 mils, and no big deal. But in this world, it's funny how it made me pause. So on either way, I think as believers that we have to walk without fear, walk without or in spite of fear, and somehow with love and faith and trust. So it's less of an answer. Do you carry a gun to church? Quite honestly, I've gone to a lot of church, and I love Jesus, and I listen to a lot of church. Honestly, for me, church it's just not a real relevant matter in my life. I'm one of those guys that are outside the church, these local churches, but inside the bigger church, at least for now. But it does seem a little messed up if you feel like you have to carry a gun to church. So either way, think about it. I think the key for us is not to be told exactly how to live your life, but the issue of making it mindful of, what living a life for Christ look like, and what are our responses? What are we conveying? What's that meaning inside of us? What does it mean to live by faith, trust the Lord, lay down our life for Him? Obviously, I can tell you, if I was there, I had no, I wish somebody could have engaged that shooter earlier. Absolutely shot him dead, sure enough. To save that loss of life, I can't imagine those people and their suffering. So, Lord have mercy, Lord bless them. When we think about these things and our blood starts to boil, and we think about maybe what we'll do, or that, maybe one of those thoughts in that same group is to take a breath and think about, what does this mean to me as a Christian? How am I different than the world? So I bless you with that. I don't know if that's a blessing. I bless us in saying, let's look to Jesus. Let's consider, let's walk circumspectly and consider the things around us. And this is certainly one of those areas. So God bless. And again, just Lord have mercy on those families. Anyway, take care. Next time.